My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 68 years old. A retired bookkeeper who thought she'd seen everything life could take. But nothing prepares you for the moment your own daughter-in-law looks you in the eye and says, "You can't stay here. We need our privacy." I left that day with one suitcase and a heart full of disbelief, thinking I'd lost everything. Then, a week later, she and my son bought a mansion that looked straight out of a magazine. New cars, glittering parties, the whole dream. Everyone thought they'd made it, but I knew better. I could feel it in my bones that something about their sudden wealth wasn't right. And when I found out the truth, it shattered everything they'd built. You want to know what happens when greed meets karma? Keep listening. I remember the morning light hitting the kitchen window. Soft and golden. The kind that makes you feel like everything is right with the world. I had just poured my first cup of coffee when the silence hit me. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was heavy. Strange. Like the air had shifted. My name is Evelyn Harris. I'm 68 years old and retired from 30 years of accounting. My husband, William, passed 3 years ago after a long fight with cancer. He was the careful one, the planner. Everything we owned, every dollar we saved, was cataloged, labeled, secure. After he died, I promised myself I'd protect what he left behind. It was our life's work. When my son Brian and his wife Melissa moved in a year ago, it seemed harmless. They said it was temporary, just until they saved enough to buy their own home. I didn't mind. The house was too quiet anyway. And having them there brought back a kind of noise I didn't realize I missed. Laughter. Footsteps. The smell of takeout boxes on Friday nights. But lately, the laughter had started to sound different. Like it didn't belong to me anymore. That morning, I walked down the hall to my study, still holding my coffee. The safe sat behind William's old desk, just as it always had. A solid steel piece he bought 20 years ago. It wasn't just for money. It held our memories. The key to our future. I spun the dial, listening to the familiar click of tumblers. The door opened easily. Too easily. Inside, the shelves were empty. For a moment, I thought my mind had gone. Maybe I moved the envelopes. Maybe I put the jewelry somewhere else. I bent down, touched the cold metal, ran my fingers along the bottom of the compartment. Smooth. No marks. No scratches. No sign of force. Just nothing. My stomach dropped. The money. $150,000 in cash. Gone. The jewelry. The gold necklace William gave me on my 40th birthday. The ring I wore after he passed. Gone too. I stood there, staring. The sound of my heartbeat louder than anything else. The smell of bacon drifted in from the kitchen. Melissa was cooking. Her voice followed, light and cheerful. "Morning. Evelyn. You want some breakfast?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. She appeared in the doorway, still holding the spatula, wearing that robe she liked, that looked too expensive for her salary. She saw the open safe behind me. "Oh. You finally decided to move some things. Where is it?" I said. And my voice didn't sound like mine. "Where is what?" she asked, smiling, pretending not to understand. "The money, the jewelry, everything." She blinked fast, her smile fading just a little. "What do you mean? You think someone took it?" "Someone did," I said. "And there are only 3 people who know the combination." That's when Brian walked in, hair messy, still half asleep, coffee mug in hand. "What's going on? Your mother's safe is empty," Melissa said quickly. He frowned. "Empty? That's crazy. Maybe you forgot where you put it." "Mom," I turned to him. "I didn't forget." He looked uncomfortably, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Well, maybe a service worker. Someone came in to fix the wiring last week." I was here. No one went near the study. Silence stretched between us. Melissa set the spatula down and folded her arms. You think we had something to do with this? I looked at her. Her eyes didn't match her tone. They darted. Just for a second. Do I need to? She stepped back. Offended. That's ridiculous. We wouldn't touch your things. Brian reached for my shoulder, but I pulled away. I'm calling the police. 2 hours later, Detective Ramirez stood in my study. A man in his 50s, with kind eyes that had seen too many sad houses. He examined the safe. Ran a finger along the edge. Nodded. Clean job, he said. No forced entry. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Only 3 people knew the combination. I said. He looked up from his notepad. And who are they? Myself. My son Brian. And my daughter-in-law Melissa. He nodded. Wrote something down. Then said quietly. We'll file a report. But without signs of a break-in. It's going to be tough. Usually in cases like this, it's someone close. Maybe not malicious. But close. I thanked him anyway. When he left, the house felt smaller. Like the walls were listening. Brian and Melissa stayed in the kitchen afterward. I heard their voices through the thin wall. Melissa's tone was high and sharp. I can't believe she'd think that of us. After everything we've done. Brian said something too low to hear. I sat at William's desk. The same desk where he used to review our bank statements. And stared at the empty safe. Numbers don't lie. That's what he always said. People do. That evening, Melissa knocked on my door. She carried a cup of tea. I know you're upset, she said softly. But maybe you just misplaced it. You've been under stress lately. Melissa, I said. Please don't insult me. Her mouth tightened. Fine. I was just trying to help. She turned to leave. Then paused at the doorway. If you need us, we'll be in the guest wing. Try to get some rest. When she was gone, I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from something colder. Calculation. I picked up a notepad and wrote the first line. Timeline. Last 7 days. I started listing. Monday, Brian at work. Melissa home by noon. Tuesday, groceries. Delivery at 3 p.m. Wednesday, no visitors. Thursday, I left for my morning walk. Returned by noon. Friday, fishing trip. Gone overnight. Saturday morning, safe empty. By the time I looked up, the sun had gone down. The house was dark, except for a sliver of light under their door. I heard a laugh. Soft. Muffled. Hers. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every sound, every glance, every offhand comment from the past few months. I remembered the times Melissa had joked about my old-fashioned ways of keeping cash, the way Brian brushed it off. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I whispered into the darkness. You think I'm old. You think I won't see it. But I see everything. The next morning, I made coffee like always, sat at the same kitchen table, and watched them head out together, laughing. Dressed too well for an ordinary Saturday. Their car pulled away, leaving a thin trail of dust down the street. I stared out the window, my reflection faint against the glass. The house behind me felt emptier than it ever had before. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to cry. I was going to count. The day started like any other. Quiet. Almost peaceful. Except for the gnawing feeling that something was about to shift again. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, trying to convince myself that life would settle back into place. It didn't. By late morning, Melissa came into the kitchen humming, wearing a crisp white blouse and perfume that smelled expensive. She looked too happy for someone living under the same roof where a police report had just been filed. She leaned against the counter, tapping her nails on her phone screen. Evelyn. she said, with that smile she always used when she wanted something. Guess what? Brian and I just closed on a house. In Scottsdale. A real one. With a pool and a view. For a second, I thought I hadn't heard her right. A house. She said it like she had just bought a box of cereal. I set my cup down slowly. That's wonderful, I said, keeping my voice calm. Congratulations. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. That their sudden fortune had nothing to do with my empty safe. But as she kept talking, the picture got clearer. It's in North Scottsdale, she said. There's an outdoor kitchen. Big backyard. Guest rooms. Finally, some privacy. Privacy. The word hit like a dart. She turned to me, tilting her head. We'll be moving out this weekend. It'll be good for us. You know, our own space. I looked at her, searching for a trace of guilt. There was none, just excitement. Like a child showing off a new toy. Brian came in then, keys jingling in his hand. He kissed her cheek, smiling like everything in life was perfect. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask if he could really be that blind. That evening they packed, talking about furniture and paint colors while I sat in the living room, surrounded by boxes that weren't mine. It felt like watching strangers prepare to leave after a long visit. Except I was the guest. The next morning, the movers arrived early. Trucks filled the driveway. Melissa directed them like a queen, giving orders. Brian followed her lead, carrying boxes labeled kitchen, living room, master bath. At noon she came into the kitchen, where I stood by the counter, folding dish towels I wasn't even sure I'd get to keep. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled politely. Evelyn, we've been thinking, she said. You might want to find another place to stay. I stared at her. This is my house. She shifted her weight, pretending sympathy. I know. But we really need some privacy now that it's just us. You understand? Right. You can visit once we're settled in. Maybe a motel for a week or two. My mouth went dry. You're asking me to leave my own home. She blinked, unbothered. You can't stay here. Evelyn, we need privacy. Go find a motel or something. Brian walked in just in time to hear it. His face tightened, but he didn't say a word. He just looked away, jaw clenched, hands deep in his pockets. Melissa gave me a quick, fake smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. It'll be good for you too. A little change of scenery. I felt something inside me crack, but I didn't let her see it. I folded the last towel, placed it on the counter, and nodded. I'll pack a few things. Melissa looked relieved, almost cheerful again. Thank you for understanding. When I walked down the hallway to my bedroom, I heard her laugh behind me, the same laugh she had the day I discovered the empty safe. I packed 2 suitcases, some clothes, family photos, a few books. The walls looked bare without the framed pictures of William and me, and the space suddenly felt foreign. As I zipped the last bag, Brian appeared in the doorway. Mom, he said softly. She didn't mean it like that. I looked up. How did she mean it? Then he rubbed his neck. We just need to start fresh. You know Melissa wants a family. It's complicated. I almost laughed. Complicated was an easy word for betrayal. She's your wife, I said. You should stand by her. But don't expect me to pretend this is right. He sighed, guilt flashing in his eyes, then left without another word. An hour later, the movers were gone. The house felt emptied of air. I dragged my suitcases to the porch, the sun sharp on my face. Melissa stood by her car, sleek and silver, hair perfectly done, talking on her phone. She didn't even look up as I walked past her. Brian took my bags and loaded them into the trunk of my old sedan. Need me to follow you to a motel? He asked quietly. No. I said. You've done enough. He hesitated, then nodded, eyes down. As I drove away, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. The curtains were open, sunlight spilling across the living room where William's old armchair used to be. Melissa was standing inside, laughing into her phone, spinning her wedding ring with her fingers. I kept driving until the image disappeared. The motel I found was 2 exits down the freeway, wedged between a gas station and a diner. The sign flickered, vacancy in tired red neon. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. There was a single bed, a small fridge, a lamp with a crooked shade. I set my suitcases down, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let out a long breath. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was more like the weight of realization pressing down. William used to tell me that people reveal themselves when money's on the table. I never believed him. I thought love, family, loyalty were stronger than greed. I was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hum of the old air conditioner filled the silence. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every conversation, every smile that now felt rehearsed. Brian's voice echoed in my head. It's complicated. I whispered into the dark. It's theft. Around midnight, I got up, poured a glass of water from the sink, and looked out the window. The freeway lights stretched endlessly, cars flashing by like ghosts. Somewhere out there, they were celebrating. In my mind, I could see it. Melissa clinking a glass of champagne in that new kitchen she was so proud of. Her perfectly manicured hand resting on Brian's arm. Her laughter filling a house she bought with my money. My fingers tightened around the glass until I thought it might break. Then I exhaled. Slow and steady. No. Not tonight. Not yet. I set the glass down and picked up my notebook again. On the first page, under the word timeline, I wrote a new line. Week 1. She bought a mansion. She told me to find a motel. I paused, then added one more sentence. Week 2. She'll start regretting it. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and lay back in the dark. For the first time since that safe opened to nothing, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. The next morning, the motel coffee tasted like burnt dust. But I drank it anyway. I needed something to keep me grounded. The television in the lobby was playing local news about a developer scandal in Scottsdale. I didn't care much until they mentioned the word real estate. And suddenly, the name of Melissa's company, Horizon Realty Group, scrolled across the bottom of the screen. It wasn't about her. At least, not yet. But something about hearing that name made my stomach twist. Outside, the desert heat was already creeping up, pressing through the windows. I decided to walk. The motel sat near a small diner, a gas station, and a strip of old shops, the kind where everything looked faded but still alive. I stopped at the diner for breakfast and tried not to think about her. But every time I saw a silver Lexus drive by, I did. That afternoon, I called my old neighbor, Mrs. Meinau, Patterson. She'd lived 2 houses down from me for 20 years. The kind of woman who saw everything without ever leaving her porch. When she picked up, her voice was warm, surprised. Evelyn, honey. Where have you been? I hesitated before answering. Just taking a little time away, I said. How's everything back on Maple Ridge? She sighed. Oh. It's busy over there now. Your son and that wife of his have been showing off that new house like it's the second coming. I saw her last week at the Lexus dealership. You should have seen her. Evelyn, all done up, talking about her home in North Scottsdale. Paid for that SUV in cash. Can you believe it? I felt the breath leave my body for a moment. I gripped the phone tighter. In cash. You said. That's what the salesman told my husband. I think she wanted everyone to know how well she's doing. Mrs. Patterson chuckled softly, unaware of what her words did to me. You'd think money grew on cactus out here. We talked a little longer. Mostly about nothing. And when I hung up, I sat in the stillness for a long time. It wasn't anger that filled me. It was clarity. Later that week, I drove past their new neighborhood. It wasn't hard to find. North Scottsdale shimmered under the afternoon sun. Rows of manicured lawns. Driveways filled with Teslas and Mercedes. Desert landscaping that looked more expensive than natural. And there it was. The mansion. Pale stucco walls. Wide glass doors. And a fountain shaped like a swan in the front yard. Melissa's car was parked out front. I saw her through the window. Showing someone around. Her movements were sharp, confident, rehearsed. She was in her element. Brian stood near the door, looking lost, like a man who'd forgotten where he belonged. I parked a block away and sat quietly for a while. I told myself I wasn't spying, that I just wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. But deep down, I knew better. As I drove back to the motel, I felt something new forming inside me. A mix of hurt and calculation. William's voice echoed in my mind. Numbers, don't lie. Follow the numbers. The next morning, I took out my notebook again and began listing details. Car purchase. House deposit. Timeline of events. The dates lined up too perfectly. Within 10 days of the missing money, she had a new car, a new house, and a new smile. That evening, I went to the small library near the motel, logged onto one of the public computers, and started searching property records. Arizona had public access. It took less than an hour to find it. The mansion was listed under Brian and Melissa Harris. Purchased for $700,000. No mortgage record. Paid in full. I leaned back in the chair and let out a quiet laugh. Paid in full. That's how confident she was. When I got back to the motel, I found a note slipped under my door. The clerk at the front desk had seen a man ask for me earlier. It was Brian. He'd left a message saying he wanted to talk. I waited for him to call. But he didn't. I imagined Melissa had something to do with that. The next morning, the phone finally rang. Mom. Brian's voice sounded tense. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said. How's the new house? He hesitated. It's great. Melissa's been busy decorating. We've been hosting some coworkers. She's really happy. I could almost hear the lie scratching at his throat. That's good, I said quietly. I hope it's everything she wanted. There was a pause before he said, I know things have been weird. Melissa feels bad about how it ended. She didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to tell him that weird wasn't the word. That betrayal has a way of cutting cleaner than any knife. But I just said, tell her not to worry. I'm fine. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, looking at my reflection in the window. My face looked older than I remembered. Not weaker, just colder. That afternoon, I went to a grocery store nearby. As I walked through the aisles, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned. And there she was. Melissa. She looked startled for half a second, then composed herself. Evelyn, she said. All smiles. What a surprise. How are you? I looked at the grocery cart filled with wine. Imported cheese. Expensive fruit. She was shopping like she had an endless wallet. I'm doing all right, I said. How's the mansion? Her smile grew wider. Oh, it's amazing. We just finished furnishing the guest wing. You should come by sometime. See how things turned out. I almost laughed. I didn't. That's generous of you. She glanced at my basket. Just a few cans of soup and bread. And her eyes softened in that pitying way that wasn't pity at all. I'm glad you're managing, she said. Motels can be rough. I nodded. They are. But they teach you to notice what really matters. She gave a small laugh. waved her perfectly manicured hand, and walked away. I watched her go, the sound of her heels sharp against the floor. When I got back to the motel, I sat by the small window again. The sun was setting over the desert, painting everything in red and gold. My phone buzzed with a new email from the Scottsdale County Clerk's office, confirming the public property record request I'd submitted earlier. I smiled faintly. Every number was falling into place. Before going to bed, I called Mrs. Patterson again. She answered on the second ring. "Evelyn, you'll never guess," she said. "That daughter-in-law of yours is already having trouble." I leaned forward. "What kind of trouble?" She lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Apparently, there's some mix-up with taxes on the new property. My friend at the county office said they got a notice already. Something about a missing payment. She's been asking around like crazy, trying to figure it out." I closed my eyes for a moment. The universe had a way of whispering before it shouted. Mrs. Patterson kept talking, but I only half listened. My mind was somewhere else, already turning over possibilities. That night, as I lay on the narrow motel bed, I thought about the word karma. People like Melissa think it's magic, like it falls from the sky. But I knew better. Karma wasn't a mystery. It was math. And I'd spent my whole life balancing numbers. By the end of the week, I decided I wouldn't wait for fate to fix things. I'd make sure the math added up myself. I turned off the light and stared into the darkness, the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the room. In my notebook, I wrote one final line before sleep took me. Week 2, she starts regretting it. And I start working. I woke up before sunrise with the same cold thought that had followed me to sleep. If the police couldn't prove who stole from me, I would prove it myself. The motel room was small, but it had one thing that mattered: a desk and an outlet. I made myself a cup of coffee with the cheap machine in the corner and opened my laptop. Years of accounting had trained me to see what others missed. Patterns, timelines, inconsistencies that people thought they could hide. I spent the next few hours pulling records from public databases, bank filings, property taxes, car registrations. It was all there if you knew where to look. By 9 o'clock, I had a spreadsheet. The house, $700,000. The Lexus, $75,000. Melissa's declared income from Horizon Realty, about $60,000 a year. Brian's IT job at a small firm, $65,000. Together, barely enough to afford a modest home, let alone a mansion. The numbers didn't lie. My money had bought their dream. I drove into town and found a small law office on Main Street with a hand-painted sign that read Marcus Webb, attorney at law. His website said he specialized in property disputes and civil matters. I called and got an appointment for that afternoon. When I arrived, the office smelled of old paper and coffee. Webb was in his 50s, silver hair at the temples. The kind of man who looked like he'd seen too many human mistakes to be shocked by any new one. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything. The robbery, the new house, the cash car, the timeline. He took notes, asked precise questions, and nodded as I handed him a folder of printed documents. When I finished, he leaned back. "Mrs. Harris, you've done most of my job already. You've got motive, opportunity, and circumstantial proof. But without physical evidence, it would be hard to convince a prosecutor." I nodded. "I'm not looking to press charges. I just want information." His eyes sharpened. "Financial information, exactly. I need to know how they paid for that property, what accounts they used, and if any large deposits match the timeline of the theft." He smiled faintly. "Public records can tell us a lot. I can access what's available through legal channels. Mortgage filings, property transfers, liens. It'll take a few days." "How much will it cost?" I asked. He slid a form across the desk. $3,000 retainer. I didn't hesitate. I wrote the check, handed it over, and said, "Find me the truth." When I left his office, I felt lighter for the first time in weeks. Back at the motel, I kept up appearances. I called Brian once, asked how they were settling in. He said things were great, that Melissa was already planning a housewarming party. I pretended to be happy for them. That night I opened my notebook again. Under the words Operation Record, I added a new entry. Phase 1, collect data. Objective, expose the truth through numbers. 3 days later, Webb called. His voice was calm, but I could hear a hint of something behind it. "Mrs. Harris, I have the records. You might want to come in." When I arrived, he had a stack of papers spread across his desk. He handed me the first one. Property purchase. $700,000. Paid through a cashier's check, drawn from a new account opened in Brian's name 2 days after the date of the theft. My stomach turned. He handed me another page. Lexus purchase. $75,000. Down payment of $25,000 cash. Same week. I closed my eyes for a moment. "So, it's confirmed." Webb nodded. "There's no legitimate income source to explain these funds, unless they inherited or sold something. Which records show they didn't." He hesitated before adding, "You could report this to the IRS. Cash transactions of this size always raise flags." I considered that. "Not yet. Let them think they're safe." Webb leaned forward. "What do you plan to do?" I smiled faintly. "The law works in numbers, doesn't it? Then I'll use their numbers against them." He nodded slowly, studying me. "Legal revenge. I've seen worse." When I returned to the motel, I felt oddly calm. For years I had balanced other people's books, cleaned their mistakes, fixed their messes. Now I was writing my own ledger. That weekend, I drove past their house again. The driveway was full. Cars lined the curb. Music floated through the night air. A party. I parked at the corner, far enough not to be seen. Through the open windows, I saw lights glimmering off glass. Melissa, in a red dress, laughing too loudly. Brian at the grill, surrounded by people I didn't know. The pool lights shimmered like stolen stars. They looked so proud of themselves, so certain of their new life. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Just clarity. Every party they threw, every purchase they made, every careless smile was built on my foundation. I wrote a new line in my notebook later that night. Phase 2, apply pressure. Objective debt. Exposure. Collapse. By Monday, Webb had another idea. He called me in again. "There's something you might find interesting." He showed me an entry in the county database. Property taxes for the new house. Partially unpaid. Just over $8,000 outstanding from last year. He looked at me over his glasses. "Arizona sells delinquent tax liens to private investors. Anyone can buy them." "What does that mean for the owner?" "It means they owe you instead of the county. And if they don't pay, you can eventually foreclose." I sat back, letting the information sink in. It was clean, legal, slow, but certain. "Can you arrange the purchase?" I asked. He nodded. "Through a shell company. If you want privacy." "Perfect." That evening, I drove to a nearby park and watched the sunset bleed across the desert sky. The air was warm, dry, endless. William had always loved sunsets. He said they reminded him that endings were just part of the pattern. I whispered softly, "You'd understand this, wouldn't you?" I could almost hear his calm voice answering. "Do the math, Evelyn. Always do the math." By the next week, Webb called again. "It's done. The tax lien is officially yours." I thanked him and hung up. Then I wrote in my notebook again. Careful, deliberate letters. Phase 2, initiated. The next step was patience. The IRS worked slowly. But numbers never stayed hidden. I would give them just enough time to get comfortable. That night, as I lay in the dim motel room, I pictured Melissa's face when the first letter arrived in her pristine mailbox. Official seal. Her name printed neatly beside the words, Internal Revenue Service. I smiled in the dark. A small, quiet smile that wasn't joy. It was certainty. The math was starting to balance. 3 weeks later, Webb called again. His voice was calm, steady. The way men sound when they know they're delivering news that matters. The IRS took the bait. He said, "They've opened an inquiry into the funds used for the house and car. You were right about the timing. It raised every flag possible." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a while. The air conditioner buzzed faintly, the smell of cheap motel detergent filling the room. For the first time since the robbery, I felt something close to peace. I didn't smile, but the corners of my mind eased. The next morning, I went about my day like nothing had changed. Breakfast at the diner. Small talk with the waitress, who always called me sweetheart. A walk through the park near the freeway. Life's little routines had become my disguise. I had learned that revenge, like investing, required patience. By the end of the week, Brian called. It was late, close to 9, and his voice carried a kind of tension I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught lying about curfew. "Mom," he said, "I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" I leaned back on the bed. "I'm fine." "Brian, you sound tired." "Everything all right?" He hesitated. "Yeah. Just a lot going on. Melissa's been dealing with some paperwork issues. Something about taxes on the new house. She's been stressed. Paperwork issues." That was how he put it. I could hear the cracks in his calm. "I hope it works out," I said. "Houses are tricky." He let out a short, nervous laugh. "Yeah, you could say that. Anyway, we'll figure it out." I wanted to tell him that the math was already figuring itself out. But I stayed quiet. Let the silence do the work. 2 days later, the phone rang again. This time, it was Melissa. Her voice was clipped, sharp around the edges. "Evelyn," she started. "Did you tell anyone about our finances?" I blinked. "Our finances? No. Why would I?" She exhaled hard, like she didn't believe me. "Because someone reported us to the IRS. We got a letter this morning. They're asking questions about the house, the car, the money." Brian's furious. I waited a beat before answering. "That sounds serious." "It is serious. We don't know how they even found out." Her tone faltered, then shifted into accusation. "You wouldn't have done something like that, would you?" I kept my voice steady. "Melissa, I don't meddle in other people's taxes. Maybe they just noticed something unusual." She scoffed. That bitter sound people make when they're realizing they might have lost control. "Yeah. Right. It's too specific to be random." I didn't reply. The line went quiet. Then she said, almost to herself, "This is going to ruin everything," and hung up. That night, I wrote in my notebook again. IRS inquiry confirmed. Phase 2 active. Over the next few days, I imagined her pacing that fancy kitchen, calling accountants, trying to sound calm. I pictured Brian sitting at his desk, rubbing his forehead as he searched for answers that didn't exist. Each day that passed, they'd feel the pressure a little more. One morning, Webb called again. The IRS sent an official notice. They're demanding proof of income sources for $70,000 in cash transactions. They've hired a tax attorney. I asked how much that would cost them. He chuckled softly. Around $8,000 just for the retainer. Probably more when the case drags. I thanked him and hung up. Later that week, I saw them. I hadn't meant to. But fate has a way of offering theater when you need it most. I was driving past a shopping plaza when I spotted Melissa coming out of a jewelry store. She wasn't smiling this time. Her phone was pressed to her ear. Her steps fast and sharp. Across the parking lot, Brian stood near the car, arguing quietly. His shoulders slumped. When she reached him, he threw up his hands, frustrated, even from the distance. I could read the exhaustion in their movements. I parked far away and watched. Just for a minute. Her face was red. His expression hollow. Then she stormed off toward the car, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed across the lot. I drove away. Slow. Steady. No satisfaction. Just acknowledgement. That night, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through the speaker. Tight. Shaky. Evelyn, I don't know what you did, but we're drowning here. The IRS is saying we owe $15,000. Brian's falling apart. If you know anything, please just stop. I replayed the message twice, then deleted it. The next morning, I went to Webb's office to deliver a small package. The payment for additional research. He looked up from his desk. Surprised. You didn't need to come in, he said. I wanted to make sure everything's moving. It is, he said. They're struggling. The IRS won't back off. And your lien remains unpaid. Good, I said quietly. Let's keep it that way. He studied me for a moment. You don't strike me as someone who enjoys this. I met his gaze. Enjoyment isn't the point. Balance is. That evening, Brian called again. His voice smaller this time. Mom, I don't know what's happening. Everything's falling apart. Melissa's blaming me for the taxes. I'm blaming her for the house. We can't sleep. We might lose everything. I closed my eyes. Listening. That must be hard. He was quiet for a long time, then whispered. Did you have something to do with this? I took a breath. I warned you both to be careful with money. Maybe this is the universe reminding you. He sighed. Defeated. Melissa's saying you're punishing us. I didn't respond. The silence was enough. After the call ended, I sat by the window and watched the cars passing on the freeway. The desert stretched beyond the motel. Endless and indifferent. Somewhere in that darkness, they were unraveling. The same way I had months ago when I found that empty safe. But the difference was simple. I learned to build from the loss. They would only collapse under it. Before I went to bed, I made one last note in my book. Week 5 IRS letter delivered. Financial pressure rising. Regret confirmed. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay in bed. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence again. Somewhere, far across town, in a house that didn't belong to them, Melissa and Brian were realizing that wealth built on theft always demands repayment. The math was simple, and the interest was just beginning. A month passed, and the storm around them grew louder. I didn't have to see it to know. The cracks had spread wide enough for anyone to hear. Webb called one morning with an update, his tone half amused, half impressed. The IRS has finalized the audit, he said. They owe $18,500. Penalties included. They're panicking. I sipped my coffee, staring at the dull motel curtains. Let them, he went on. They've already tried to apply for personal loans. Denied at 3 banks. Their credit's shot. The car is upside down. They owe more than it's worth. I thanked him, then sat in silence after the call. It wasn't joy that filled me. It was quiet satisfaction. The kind that comes from watching a pattern unfold exactly as predicted. Later that afternoon, the phone rang again. It was Brian. His voice cracked before he even said hello. Mom. Please. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. He hesitated. Did you tell anyone about the money, the IRS? The attorney. Anyone, I kept my voice calm. Why would I do that? He exhaled shakily. Melissa thinks you did. She's losing it. We got hit with another penalty. I don't even know how we'll pay. That's a lot of stress. I said softly. He laughed bitterly. Stress, we're drowning. We might have to sell the car. Maybe even the house. I stayed quiet. He lowered his voice. She said something stupid last night. Said maybe taking that cash was a mistake. The words hung in the air between us. I waited. But he didn't say more. He realized what he'd just admitted and rushed to cover it. I mean, it's just been hard. Okay, we'll figure something out. I wanted to tell him the figuring out was long past due. But I didn't. I let him end the call. His voice trembling around the edges. That night, the motel felt too still. I sat at the desk, flipping through my notebook. The list of phases stared back at me, neatly outlined. Each one checked off. The last box on the page was still empty. Phase 3 foreclosure setup. I knew it was time. The next morning, I went back to Webb's office. His assistant offered coffee, and I accepted. He was waiting with a folder already open on his desk. He tapped a few pages as I sat down. They've missed 2 payments on the property tax lien, he said. Under state law. That gives us the right to demand the full balance immediately. How much? $10,500 with interest. I nodded. Send the letter. He raised an eyebrow. You want to do it now? Yes. It's time. He gave a small, slow smile. This is the part where most people get nervous. I'm not most people. That evening, I walked along the sidewalk outside the motel, watching the sun sink low behind the mountains. The heat had faded into a soft breeze. My reflection followed me in the window of each parked car. I looked calm, maybe even peaceful. But inside, everything was sharp and cold. A week later, Webb called to confirm delivery. Certified mail. Signature required. They received it yesterday. He said. Good. I replied. That same evening, the phone rang again. I knew who it was before I answered. Evelyn. Her voice trembled, though she tried to sound controlled. We just got some letter from a company called Desert Crest Holdings. They say we owe over $10,000 for old taxes. That must be stressful. I said quietly. She snapped. Don't play dumb. You know something about this. I paused. Tax debts get sold all the time. Melissa, you must have missed a payment. You did this. I know you did. If you paid your taxes, there wouldn't be a debt to buy. She inhaled sharply. You're unbelievable. You're punishing us. I'm collecting what's owed, I said. She hung up without another word. The next few days were silent. I kept to my schedule. Coffee. Reading. Walks at sunset. Each evening, I passed the small post office across the street. And each time I imagined the chaos in their house as the second letter arrived. The official notice spelling out their deadline. On the 4th day, the phone rang again. It was Brian. His voice was low. Broken. Mom. She's gone through every account we have. There's nothing left. The credit cards are maxed out. I can't sleep. I didn't say anything. He took a shaky breath. We made a mistake. I know that now. We should have never touched that money. I closed my eyes. Finally. Then he whispered. Can you help us, please? Just a loan. Something to get us through. No. I said softly. He was silent for a long moment, then hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep either. Not because I doubted what I'd done, but because I could hear echoes of William's voice again. He would have told me to stop before it went too far. But far was a matter of perspective. The next morning, I sat at the small table in my motel room, staring at my notebook. I added a new entry. Week 9 demand letter received. No payment. Emotional breakdown confirmed. Then I added the next line. Week 10, prepare foreclosure filing. Before I could finish, the phone buzzed with a text. It was from Brian. I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could undo it. I didn't respond. That afternoon, Webb called again. He said simply, the lien is officially in default. You can move forward anytime. I thanked him and hung up. Then I stood by the window, watching the sunlight reflect off the motel's cracked parking lot. Somewhere across town, that big house with its glittering pool and spotless windows was starting to feel smaller. I took a deep breath, then picked up my pen. Week 10, Phase 3 activated. It wasn't anger that pushed me now. It was the simple satisfaction of balance restored. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain from the desert. It hadn't rained in months, but I could feel it coming. And when it came, it would wash everything clean. 2 days later, Webb called with a tone that carried both caution and curiosity. He's found out, he said. Your son knows Desert Crest Holdings is yours. I closed my notebook slowly. How did he find out? He hired a private investigator, paid $2,000 up front. The man traced the LLC through the registered agent's office. Webb hesitated before adding, he's angry. I looked out the motel window at the dusty parking lot, shimmering in the afternoon sun. I expected as much. That evening, a car door slammed outside my room. The sound startled me, sharp and close. Before I could stand, there was a heavy knock. I opened the door and found Brian standing there, face red, eyes hollow, papers crumpled in his fist. You, he said. It's you. Desert Crest Holdings. The IRS. Everything. I didn't move. Good evening. Brian. He stepped forward. Don't act calm. You're trying to ruin us. I met his eyes. You ruined yourselves when you stole from me. His voice cracked. I didn't. She did. I tilted my head. But you spent it. Didn't you? He went quiet, the fight draining out of him. I could see the exhaustion in his shoulders, the months of fear and guilt wearing him thin. He looked older than his father had the year we buried him. I leaned against the doorframe. You can yell. You can blame me. But you still owe me. $10,000. July 25th, at 5 p.m. He rubbed his face, his voice barely steady. We can't pay. We're selling the car. Trying to refinance. Please. Mom. Just give us time. I shook my head. The time for kindness ended the day you opened that safe. His eyes glistened, but his anger returned quickly, hot and desperate. Fine, he said. You want a war, you've got one. He stormed back to his car and drove off, tires screeching. I stood in the doorway until the sound faded, then closed the door and exhaled. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. The next morning, Webb called again. He threatened legal action. He said. Claimed harassment. His attorney told him it's pointless. Everything you've done is legal. Good. I said. Let him waste money. Over the next few days, I went about my routine. But my thoughts kept drifting to Brian. Part of me remembered the boy who used to help me in the garden. The one who laughed when William sprayed him with the hose. That memory stung more than anything else. On Thursday, my phone rang again. It was Melissa this time, her voice sharp with panic. I can't do this anymore, she said. He's falling apart. He's blaming me for everything. We fight every day. That must be exhausting. I said. You're enjoying this, aren't you? No, I said quietly. I'm watching cause and effect. She started crying. We're going to lose the house. You already lost your integrity. Melissa, the house is just next. She sobbed for a few seconds before hanging up. 2 nights later, Webb called again. He sounded calm, methodical. They've listed the property for sale. Asking price, $415,000. After the mortgage and fees, they'll barely clear 30. Not enough to cover what they owe. I felt a strange pang in my chest. Something between victory and sadness, he added. They also hired another investigator. He found nothing. The report confirmed every transaction is legal. Thank you, I said. After I hung up, I went for a drive. The desert night was cold. The stars sharp against the sky. I took the long road towards Scottsdale, following instinct more than reason. When I turned onto their street, I saw it. The mansion. The lights were dim. The once perfect lawn unkempt. A small for sale sign leaned crookedly in the yard. I parked across the street and watched. Inside, shadows moved. Pacing. Through the window, I could see Brian sitting at the kitchen table, with his head in his hands. Melissa stood near the counter, shouting, gesturing wildly. I couldn't hear her, but I knew the words. Blame, regret, fear. After a few minutes, she threw something. Maybe a glass. And it shattered against the wall. Brian didn't move. I drove away. Slow and silent. Feeling no joy. Just closure inching closer. Back at the motel, I made tea and sat by the window. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. I opened my notebook and began writing again. Week 11, family collapse complete. Property listed. Financial ruin imminent. I set down the pen and stared at the page for a long time. My reflection in the window looked tired but firm. For the first time, I let myself imagine the end of this, the final balance. The next morning, Webb called early. His voice was steady as always. They missed the payment. Default confirmed. You can initiate foreclosure next week. I thanked him and hung up. Then looked at my hands. They didn't shake. I had expected guilt. Maybe sorrow. What I felt instead was inevitability. Later that day, I received a text from Brian. Short. Simple. I'm sorry. I typed a reply. Then erased it. There was nothing left to say. That evening, the sky turned red with dust. I stepped outside the motel door and watched the horizon fade into gray. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled low. It hadn't rained in months. But maybe it would tonight. When I went back inside, I turned off the lamp, sat on the edge of the bed, and listened to the silence. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the still air, waiting for release. And when it finally broke, I knew everything would fall exactly where it belonged. The storm finally came that night. Rain hit the roof of the motel like 1,000 tiny fists. Steady and relentless. I sat by the window and watched the lightning flicker across the desert sky. It had been 6 months since the theft. And the world outside looked cleaner somehow. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Webb. Call me when you can, he said. It's time. By noon, I was in his office. He had 2 documents on the desk, both thick with fine print. The first was the foreclosure notice, already filled out. The second was the calculation sheet. Original lien, $9,180. Add 7 months of interest. Penalties and legal fees. Total, $22,000 even. He looked up. Once you sign this, they'll have 30 days. If they don't pay, the property goes to auction. I picked up the pen, studied the page, and signed without hesitation. Send it today. He nodded. Are you ready for what comes next? I smiled faintly. I've been ready since the day they emptied my safe. 2 days later, they signed for delivery. Webb called again that evening. He said they opened it right there in front of the mail carrier. You could hear shouting through the door. I poured myself a cup of coffee and said nothing. The next morning, the phone rang. Brian's voice came through, strained and raw. 22,000, it was only 8, you can't do this. Interest accumulates when you don't pay. I said. He was breathing hard, almost panting. You know I don't have that kind of money. The IRS took everything. Then you'll lose the house. Simple as that. Please. Mom. He was crying now, his voice breaking. Have mercy. I waited, letting the silence hang between us. Finally, he said the words I had been waiting to hear since the beginning. I took the money from the safe. I admit it. I just wanted to pay it back before you found out. I made a mistake. You made a choice. I said quietly. Choices have consequences. He started sobbing. What do you want from me, my life? No. Brian. I want what you took. Since you spent it, I'll take what you bought with it. He hung up. An hour later, Melissa called. Her voice was shrill. Desperate. Evelyn. Please. You can't do this. I didn't know about the theft. I swear I didn't. You suspected. I said. You looked the other way. I was wrong. But please. Don't do this to me. You're my family. I closed my eyes. You forgot that when you told me to go find a motel. She started crying. You're cruel. No. I said softly. I'm fair. She hung up too. That evening, Webb called again. They've tried to get 3 more loans. All denied. No bank will touch them now. They're trapped. Good. I said. Then, let's make it official. He hesitated. I can draft a settlement offer before the auction if you'd like. Sometimes, it helps them feel like they had a choice. I thought about it. Offer them to sell the house for the mortgage balance. Plus forgive the lien. Let them walk away with some dignity. He nodded. I'll draft it. The next day, Brian called again. Fury, replacing desperation. 400,000, that's theft. You're trying to steal the house. I sighed. I'm offering you more than it will fetch at auction. You should thank me. I'll never sell to you. Never. Then I'll buy it at auction for less. I said, your choice. He cursed and hung up. That night, Melissa called, her voice low and shaking. Is the offer real? You'd actually forgive the debt, yes? But both of you have to agree and vacate in 2 weeks. She was silent for a long time. He'll never agree. He's too proud. Pride is expensive. I said, you have 72 hours. 3 days passed. No reply. I told Webb to withdraw the offer. Proceed with foreclosure. The hearing was scheduled for late August. Webb attended on my behalf. He texted updates from the courthouse. Their lawyer argued hardship. The judge reviewed and approved foreclosure. It was done. That night, Brian called again. Drunk this time. His voice was slurred. Thick with defeat. What if I can get the money? What if I find it somehow? You have 20 days. I said, give me 60. Please. I've given you 6 months. Brian, go to sleep. He cursed quietly and hung up. When the call ended, I turned off the light and sat in the dark. I should have felt something like victory. But all I felt was the weight of finality. 3 weeks later, Webb confirmed the date. Auction, August 28th. Maricopa County Courthouse. That morning, I woke early, dressed in my Navy suit, and drove into town. The courthouse was already buzzing with people. Webb met me at the door. Steady as always. Ready. He asked, let's finish this. We walked through security. Up to the 3rd floor. The auction room smelled of coffee and paper. I sat near the center, hands folded. Brian and Melissa were in the back. He looked gaunt, exhausted. She was pale, her eyes red from crying. The auctioneer stood at the front, reading the property list. When he reached their address, my heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Opening bid. 250,000. I raised my hand. 270. $290. The room was silent. Sold to bidder 12 for $290,000. The gavel hit the desk. Sharp and final. I walked to the clerk's table. Handed over the cashier's check. Behind me, I could hear a broken sound that might have been Brian. The clerk smiled politely. Property transfers immediately. Current occupants have 48 hours to vacate. When I turned, I saw Brian standing there. Eyes wet. You took everything, he said. No, I said. You took everything from me first. I just balanced the books. He started to say something. But Melissa pulled his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. They walked away together, their steps slow and heavy. I stood there for a moment longer, then walked outside. The Arizona sun hit my face like fire. Webb joined me near the steps. It's over, he said. Not yet, I replied. 48 hours left. He nodded. I drove home in silence, the air thick with heat and closure. The motel room looked smaller that day, but quieter too. I sat at the desk, opened my notebook, and wrote the final entry for the week. Week 13 auction complete. Property reclaimed. 48 hours until possession. I closed the book, rested my hand on the cover, and let out a long, steady breath. The storm had passed. The sky outside was clear again. But inside me, something was still moving, slow and deep, like the rumble after thunder. 48 hours passed quietly, though the air seemed heavier with each hour. I kept busy, mostly to keep from thinking too much. I packed my things at the motel, folded my few clothes into neat stacks, and left the room key on the chipped wooden counter. The clerk smiled, asked if I was heading home, and I told him yes, though neither of us knew what that really meant. The drive to Scottsdale was silent, except for the hum of the tires and the occasional rattle of the old dashboard. The sky was clear and white-hot, the kind of Arizona day that made even the mountains shimmer like glass. When I turned onto their street, I slowed down. My street again. I reminded myself. The mansion looked different now. The once perfect lawn was brown in patches, the flower beds overgrown, the blinds were half closed. Uneven, like the house itself had grown tired. A small moving truck was parked out front, its back door open. Cardboard boxes were stacked beside the walkway. Brian stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. Melissa was pacing near the truck, and phone in hand, snapping orders at two movers who didn't seem to care. Her voice carried across the yard, sharp and brittle. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, letting the air conditioner hum softly. When I finally stepped out, the heat hit me like a wall. Melissa saw me first. She froze, then squared her shoulders, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So you came to watch the show, she said. I walked closer, slow and steady. I came to collect what's mine. Her face twisted. It was never yours. You stole it. I raised an eyebrow. From whom the thief? Brian turned at that, his face pale. Mom, please. Let's just not do this here. I stopped a few feet from him. Do what? Brian, hold you accountable. He looked down. His voice was small. We're leaving. We packed everything. The bank accounts are empty. The house, it's yours now. Melissa dropped her phone into her purse and crossed her arms. Don't act like this makes you a hero. Evelyn, you broke your own family. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the air between us. Family isn't built on theft. It's built on trust. You broke that. Not me. She laughed bitterly. You think this is justice? You ruined our lives over a few stacks of old cash. That cash was your father-in-law's life savings, I said. The last thing he worked for before he died. You laughed in my face when I lost it. You told me to find a motel. Now you know what that feels like. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her lip trembled before she turned away. Shouting at the movers to hurry, Brian stepped closer, his eyes glistening. Mom, I can't fix what I did. But I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I studied his face. The boy I'd raised was gone. But something human still flickered behind the guilt. I nodded slowly, then learned from it. That's all that's left. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Melissa didn't look back as she got into the car. When the truck door slammed shut, the sound echoed down the empty street. I watched them drive away, their taillights disappearing at the corner. The silence that followed felt unreal. The house stood there, empty now, the afternoon sun glaring off its white walls. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The front door creaked when I opened it. Inside, it smelled of lemon, cleaner, and dust. The furniture was gone, but their shadows still marked the floor. The marble countertops gleamed, untouched. The faint ring from where a champagne bottle had once sat still stained the surface near the sink. I walked through each room slowly, letting the echoes of their laughter fade. Upstairs, the master bedroom was stripped bare, except for a single box left behind in the corner. Inside were a few photographs. Brian and Melissa at a lake, smiling, Melissa with her arm around him. Sunlight in her hair, and one photo of me, taken years ago at Christmas, standing beside the tree with William. I set that one aside. In the closet, I found the empty space where the safe used to sit. I ran my hand along the wall, feeling the smoothness where it had been patched and painted over. I stood there for a while, remembering the weight of the metal door, the sound of tumblers clicking into place. Downstairs, the afternoon light poured through the tall windows, making the tiles glow. I sat on the cold floor in the center of the empty living room and closed my eyes. For months, I had imagined this moment. I thought it would feel like triumph. It didn't. It felt like a balance sheet closing at last. Nothing more. Nothing less. Around 6, Webb arrived with the keys and final documents. He handed them over gently. "It's officially yours," he said. "Thank you." He glanced around the bare room. "Looks strange without furniture." "It looks honest," I said. He smiled faintly, nodding. "If you need me for the title transfer, just call." When he left, I locked the door and walked through the rooms once more. I ended in the kitchen, where the light had turned gold. On the counter, I placed the photo of me and William. Then I opened a window and let the desert air in. Outside, the sky was turning pink. The quiet settled heavy and deep, the kind that only comes after a storm. I leaned against the counter and let it fill me. Somewhere, miles away, Brian and Melissa were starting over with nothing but regret and each other. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate takes energy. And I was tired. I only hoped they'd remember what honesty costs, and how much harder it is to earn it back. I looked around the empty house one last time, then turned off the lights. Tomorrow I would start making it mine again. Tonight, I would let the silence stay. The house was quiet in a way I hadn't heard in years. No voices. No footsteps. No music playing from another room. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of the desert wind slipping through the open window. I walked barefoot across the cool tile, the emptiness echoing softly with each step. For the first time since everything began, the silence didn't hurt. It felt earned. The next few days passed in slow motion. I cleaned each room by hand, taking my time. There was something sacred about wiping away their fingerprints, scrubbing the walls where their framed photos once hung. I opened all the windows and let the sunlight pour in. The air smelled like lemon oil and new beginnings. By the third day, I'd moved in a few pieces of furniture I'd kept in storage. William's old recliner, a small oak table, the china cabinet we bought our first year of marriage. I placed them carefully. Each one a quiet reclaiming of space. That afternoon, while dusting the living room, I found a small envelope tucked under the baseboard near the fireplace. It was old, sealed, addressed to E. My first instinct was confusion, then suspicion. I tore it open gently. Inside was a folded piece of paper, handwritten in my son's uneven scrawl. Mom. It read. I don't know what else to say. I was stupid. And I thought I could fix it before you ever knew. I was wrong. I don't blame you for taking everything back. Maybe one day you'll forgive me. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. For all his mistakes, that one page was the most honest thing he'd ever given me. I slipped it into my notebook, between the last few entries, and closed it. Some debts can't be paid in cash. That night, the sky turned purple and gold. I sat on the back patio, watching the sun melt behind the mountains. The air smelled of creosote and rain, the last hint of summer storms. I thought of William, how he used to sit beside me with his newspaper, nodding quietly. Always a man of few words but infinite patience. You were right, I whispered. Numbers don't lie. But people can change. The next morning, Webb stopped by to finalize the paperwork. He handed me the deed, embossed and official. It felt heavier than it looked. It's done, he said. The property is legally yours again. I traced my name across the top of the document, ink still faintly damp. Thank you, Marcus. He smiled. I've seen a lot of cases like this, but not many with your kind of resolve. Most people either give up or lose themselves in the process. You just balanced it. I nodded. Balance is what I do. Always has been. Before leaving, he paused at the door. What will you do now? I looked out the window at the backyard, the quiet pool glimmering under the morning light. I think I'll plant something. Maybe roses. He smiled and left, closing the door softly behind him. For weeks after, I kept to a simple rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons reading in William's chair, evenings cooking for one. I found comfort in the routine, in the small proof that peace doesn't always come loudly. One afternoon, while trimming the hedges, I heard a car pull into the driveway. When I turned, Brian was standing there, hands stuffed in his jeans pockets, shoulders slumped. He looked thinner, older, the weight of regret clear in his eyes. I set the shears down. What are you doing here? He hesitated before answering. I just wanted to see you. I crossed my arms, not unkindly. You've seen me. He took a breath. We're living in Mesa now. Small apartment. I got a new job. Melissa's trying. It's not easy, but we're doing better. I nodded slowly. Good. He looked down, then met my eyes again. I came to bring you this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the gold necklace William had given me on my 40th birthday, the one that had vanished from the safe. I felt my throat tighten. I found it in one of Melissa's old jewelry boxes. He said, I thought you should have it. I took it from him, the metal cool in my hand. Thank you. He nodded, his eyes glossy. I know sorry doesn't fix it, Mom, but I am. I really am. I believed him. For the first time, I truly did. We stood there in the warm afternoon light, neither of us speaking for a while. Finally, I said softly, mistakes don't define people, Brian. What they do after does. He nodded, his voice low. I'm trying to be better. I know. When he left, I watched his car drive down the street, the same road that had seen so much betrayal and so much repair. The wind picked up, rustling the rose bushes. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook for the last time. I flipped past the lists, the phases, the dates, until I found the last blank page. I wrote slowly, carefully. Final entry: debt settled. Property restored. Forgiveness pending. I closed the notebook and set it beside the letter he had left behind. Then I stood, walked outside, and watched the sky fade into twilight. The pool reflected the stars like a mirror. The surface, calm and still. I walked to the edge, holding the necklace in my hand, and let it catch the last bit of starlight before slipping it around my neck. It felt right there, against my skin, where it had always belonged. The house behind me was silent, but not empty anymore. It was alive again, filled with memory and peace and the faint hum of forgiveness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. The mornings had started to feel soft again. I would wake to the sound of birds in the backyard, the smell of coffee filling the kitchen, sunlight crawling slowly across the tiled floor. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt settled, like it had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. A few weeks passed quietly. I planted the roses like I said I would, red and white, along the back fence. The first buds were starting to open, small and careful, like they were testing the world before trusting it. Every morning, I'd water them and talk to them a little, the way William used to talk to his tomatoes. One afternoon, I drove into town to pick up supplies. On the way back, I stopped by the diner near the old motel. The waitress still recognized me. "You finally got out of that place." "Huh," she said with a smile. I nodded, smiled back, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a secret. When I pulled into the driveway later that day, a car was already parked out front, a silver sedan, old but familiar. My stomach tightened. Brian was sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands. I got out of the car slowly. "What's wrong?" He stood up, his face pale, his eyes rimmed red. "It's Melissa." I waited. "She left," he said quietly. "Packed up last night while I was at work. Took what little money we had left. I don't even know where she went." I didn't say anything right away. I could see the tremor in his hands, the guilt, the loss, the loneliness, all sitting in the same place. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "I guess karma caught up." "Huh, it has a way of doing that," I said softly. He looked at me, his voice breaking. "I thought I could fix it all. I thought if I worked hard enough, paid back enough, something would make it right again. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, Brian. Some things are meant to be learned from." He nodded, eyes shining. "I know. I don't know what to do now." "You start over," I said. "One honest day at a time." He swallowed hard, then took a seat again on the steps. I sat beside him. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air was warm and still. The smell of roses drifted through the yard. "After a while," he said, "I used to think you were cruel for what you did. And now I think you were the only one who ever told me the truth." That made me smile. Small and tired. Truth has a cost, Brian. Most people don't want to pay it. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the roses. "They're beautiful," he said. "They'll be better next season." I told him, "Growth takes time." We sat there until the light began to fade. When he stood, he looked more grounded somehow. Less like a man running from his past, and more like someone learning to carry it. He turned to me before leaving. "Mom, what do I do now?" I stood too, resting a hand on his arm. "You live, Brian. You work. You stay humble. And you remember this. Money comes back. Trust doesn't." He nodded, eyes wet again, and walked to his car. I watched him drive off until the taillights vanished at the end of the street. That night, I made myself a small dinner and ate by the open window. The air was cool, the kind that carries the sound of the city in the distance, but still feels like peace. I found myself thinking of Melissa, wondering where she'd go next. How long it would take before she found someone else to blame for her choices. Later, I went to my desk and opened the notebook again. I hadn't written in it since the day Brian brought back the necklace. The pages were nearly full. Neat rows of dates, phases, and notes. I turned to the last page and stared at it for a long time before writing. Week 16. The cycle ends. Forgiveness begins. I sat back and let out a long breath. The ink on the page glimmered faintly under the lamplight. Before bed, I stepped outside one last time. The roses were swaying gently in the breeze, the petals glistening under the moonlight. Somewhere down the street, a sprinkler clicked on, steady and rhythmic. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. For months I had lived on revenge, on precision and control. Now, for the first time, I allowed myself to rest. Inside, the house was dark and quiet. I left the notebook open on the table, the last line still visible. When I finally lay down, I whispered a small prayer. Not for justice, not for victory, but for peace. The kind that doesn't need to be proven, the kind that simply stays. The next morning began quietly. Sunlight spilling through the kitchen window in soft lines. The house was still, filled with that early calm that only comes when everything has finally found its place. I brewed my coffee and stood at the counter, looking out at the roses. They had bloomed in full, stretching toward the light. For months, I had lived through storms of loss, betrayal, and reckoning. Now the stillness felt like mercy. A letter arrived that afternoon. The envelope was plain, my name written in a familiar hand. I opened it slowly, already knowing. It was from Brian. Mom, it began. I just wanted you to know I found a small house in Mesa. Nothing special, but it's ours. I started a new job at a repair shop, and it feels good to work with my hands again. I've been going to meetings, trying to stay clean. I don't know if you'll ever trust me again, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. I read it twice, then set it down beside my coffee. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. That evening, the sky turned orange and violet over the desert. I sat on the porch with a blanket and the notebook that had followed me through it all. Its pages were worn, creased from months of ink and late-night resolve. I turned to the last page, the one after forgiveness begins. For a long time, I couldn't think of what to write. Then I finally picked up my pen and wrote the truth. Week 17. The story ends. The peace stays. I closed the notebook, feeling the weight lift from my chest. Just as I was about to go back inside, headlights appeared down the street. A small sedan slowed in front of the house, and the driver's door opened. It was Brian. He got out, holding a grocery bag in one hand. I walked down the path to meet him. "Hey," he said softly. "I was in the neighborhood. Brought you something." He handed me the bag. Inside was a loaf of bread, a small jar of honey, and a bunch of white daisies. Simple, thoughtful, like the old days. I smiled, my throat tight. "You didn't have to." He looked down, scuffing the dirt with his shoe. "I wanted to. I just wanted to see you again, without all the noise." We went inside and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once balanced the family bills, where William used to read the paper every morning. I poured 2 cups of coffee, and for a while, we just sat there, saying nothing. After a long pause, he said, "I used to think money fixed everything. That's what Melissa taught me. But I think she was wrong. She was..." I said quietly. He nodded. What fixes things is work. And time. And honesty. I added. He gave a small smile. Yeah. That too. When he left later that night, the air felt lighter. I stood at the window and watched his car fade into the distance. A single pair of headlights swallowed by the dark. I thought of how far we'd both come. How sometimes life burns everything down just to show you what can grow back. Inside, the clock ticked softly. I walked through the house one last time before bed, touching the door frames, the cool marble counter, the photographs I'd hung back up. William's smile looked steadier under the warm lamplight. I could almost hear his voice again. Calm and certain. You did what you had to do. Evelyn, you kept the balance. Outside, the roses swayed in the breeze. The air smelled of new blooms and wet soil. I turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow from the porch to spill across the floor. As I settled into bed, I realized that revenge had never really been about getting even. It was about remembering who I was before they took something from me. It was about reclaiming not just the house, but the quiet inside my own heart. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand applause, only understanding. And as I closed my eyes, the peace I'd fought so long to earn finally settled in for good. If you've ever lost everything only to find yourself again, then you know this truth. Justice doesn't always come in the way we expect, but it always arrives right on time. And when it does, it's quiet, like the sound of roses blooming after the rain. Stay for the next story. There's always another beginning waiting just past the ending.